The blood-red sunset cast long shadows across Socorro, New Mexico territory, as Willow Caldwell stood trembling on the auction block. Her three sisters huddled behind her like frightened birds. The year was 1878, and the four Caldwell sisters had become a commodity to be traded after their parents' wagon had been attacked by bandits 3 weeks prior, leaving them orphaned and at the mercy of an unforgiving frontier. Four healthy girls, good for cooking, cleaning, and whatever else you might fancy. The auctioneer called out to the crowd of dusty men who had gathered in the town square. His voice carried the casual cruelty of a man who saw human flesh as nothing more than merchandise. Sold as a set, gentlemen. Who'll start the bidding? Willow, at 22, was the eldest, with honey-blonde hair and eyes that had once sparkled with dreams but now held only fear and determination. Behind her stood Winifred, 20, with auburn hair and a quiet intelligence that had made her the scholar of the family. Then came Wren, 18, slight but strong-willed, her dark hair braided tightly against her neck. The youngest was Whitney, barely 18, with golden curls and a face still round with youth. "I'll take them all," a deep voice called from the back of the crowd. The sea of dusty cowboys parted to reveal a tall man with broad shoulders and a face weathered by sun and hardship. He wore a black Stetson pulled low over his eyes, but Willow could see the firm set of his jaw, the glint of determination in his gaze. "Name your price." The auctioneer's eyebrows shot up. $500 for the lot, Mr. Maverick." "Done," the man said, stepping forward. He removed his hat, revealing sun-streaked brown hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to look straight through Willow. "Zachary Maverick. I own the Double M Ranch outside of town. You'll be coming home with me." Willow's heart hammered in her chest as she gathered her sisters close. From the frying pan into the fire, she thought bitterly. But what choice did they have? "What do you want with us?" she demanded, her voice stronger than she felt. Zachary Maverick's eyes softened slightly. "I need help running my ranch. It's a big house, been empty too long. You'll have your own rooms, decent meals, and fair treatment." He paused, his voice dropping so only she could hear. "And you'll be safe. That's more than you'd get anywhere else in this town tonight." As the sisters were led away from the auction block, Willow couldn't help but wonder if they had just been saved or if their ordeal was only beginning. The wagon ride to the Double M Ranch was silent and tense. The sisters sat huddled together in the back while Zachary drove the team, his broad back straight as a ramrod. Whitney clung to Willow's arm, her eyes wide with terror. "What's going to happen to us?" she whispered. "I don't know," Willow admitted, stroking her sister's golden curls. "But we're together. That's what matters. I promised Mama we'd stay together, and we have." The memory of their mother's final words still haunted Willow. As the bandits had ridden away, leaving their parents bleeding in the dust, Mama had gripped Willow's hand and whispered, "Keep them safe. Keep them together." Willow had made that promise, and she intended to keep it, no matter what this strange cowboy had in mind. The Double M Ranch appeared on the horizon just as the last light was fading from the sky. It was larger than Willow had expected, a sprawling main house with a wide porch, several outbuildings, and fenced corrals where cattle and horses grazed. In another life, she might have found it beautiful. "Here we are," Zachary announced, bringing the wagon to a halt. "Home, home." The word stuck in Willow's throat like a piece of dry bread. "Come on," he said, jumping down from the wagon and extending a hand to help them down. "You must be hungry. There's food inside." Willow ignored his outstretched hand and jumped down on her own, then helped her sisters. She wasn't about to show weakness to this man, not when her sisters were looking to her for strength. The interior of the house was surprisingly well appointed, with solid furniture and clean floors. A large stone fireplace dominated the main room, and oil lamps cast a warm glow over everything. It didn't look like the home of a bachelor rancher. "Did you have a wife?" Winifred asked, her analytical mind always searching for understanding. A shadow passed over Zachary's face. "No," he said shortly. "My mother lived here until last winter. Influenza took her." He gestured toward a hallway. "There are 4 bedrooms down that hall. You can each have your own or share as you prefer. The kitchen is through there. I've had Mrs. Delgado from town bring some supplies, but she only comes once a week." "Why did you buy us?" Willow asked bluntly, unable to contain the question any longer. Zachary ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly uncomfortable. "This place is too big for one man. I need help running it, and—" He hesitated. "I couldn't stand watching them sell you off one by one, not when I knew what would likely happen to you. So you're our savior." Willow's voice dripped with skepticism. "No, madam, I'm your employer. You'll work and I'll provide for you. Fair exchange." "And what exactly will this work entail?" Willow pressed, her implication clear. Zachary's face hardened. "Cooking, cleaning, helping with the ranch accounts. Maybe some gardening if you've a mind for it. Nothing more." He moved toward the door. "I sleep in the bunkhouse with my ranch hands. This house is yours now. I'll be back in the morning to show you around." After he left, the sisters explored their new home in stunned silence. The bedrooms were clean and comfortable, each with its own bed and chest of drawers. The kitchen was well stocked with food. There was even a small library filled with books that made Winifred's eyes light up for the first time in weeks. "You believe him?" Wren asked as they gathered in the kitchen, where Willow was heating soup on the stove. "I don't know what to believe anymore," Willow admitted, "but we're together and we're safe for tonight. That's all that matters." "I think he meant what he said," Whitney offered, her youthful face serious. "He doesn't look at us the way those men at the auction did." Willow wished she could share her youngest sister's optimism, but life had taught her that men rarely did anything out of pure kindness, especially on the frontier. Whatever Zachary Maverick wanted from them, she was certain they hadn't heard the whole truth yet. That night, Willow lay awake long after her sisters had fallen asleep, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch. The distant lowing of cattle, the occasional whinny of a horse, the soft whisper of the desert wind. From her window, she could see the light still burning in the bunkhouse. Was Zachary Maverick awake too, thinking about the 4 women now living in his house? What did he really want from them? Morning came earlier on the ranch than it had in town. Willow woke to the sound of activity outside, men calling to each other, horses snorting, the clang of metal tools. The smell of coffee drifted through the house, and she realized someone was in the kitchen. She dressed quickly in the simple calico dress that was one of the few possessions they'd managed to save, then went to investigate. Zachary Maverick stood at the stove, frying bacon in a large cast iron pan. He looked up when she entered, nodding in greeting. "Good morning. Thought you might appreciate a hot breakfast after everything. Coffee's ready." Willow stared at him, confused by this gesture. "I thought we were supposed to be cooking for you." "Starting tomorrow," he said, sliding bacon onto a plate. "Today, I'm showing you around the ranch, explaining how things work here. Best to start with a good meal." One by one, her sisters appeared, drawn by the smell of food. They ate in awkward silence at first, but gradually began to relax as hunger overcame suspicion. The food was good, simple but plentiful. "So, what skills do you ladies have?" Zachary asked as they finished eating. "Willow's an excellent seamstress," Winifred offered. "She used to make all our clothes. And Winnie can read and cipher better than anyone," Whitney added eagerly. "Papa said she was smarter than most men." "Whitney can grow anything," Wren chimed in. "She has a way with plants. And Wren can ride like the wind," Willow said, smiling at her sister. "She's fearless on horseback." Zachary nodded, absorbing this information. All useful skills on a ranch. "And what about cooking?" The sisters exchanged glances. "We can all cook," Willow said. "Our mother taught us." "Good. Mrs. Delgado has been coming in to cook for me, but she's getting on in years. I'd rather have someone here full-time." "And what will you pay us for our services?" Willow asked, straightening her spine. Zachary looked surprised. "I paid $500 for you. Most would say that's payment enough." "Most would be wrong," Willow retorted, her eyes flashing. "You bought our freedom from that auction block, Mr. Maverick, and for that we're grateful. But if we're to work for you, we expect fair compensation." For a moment, tension crackled between them. Then, unexpectedly, Zachary laughed. "You've got spine, Miss Caldwell, I'll give you that." His expression grew more serious. "How about this? Room, board, and $10 a month each. Plus, after a year, if you've fulfilled your duties satisfactorily, I'll give you the deed to a small parcel of land on the north edge of my property. There's a cabin there needs work, but it could be a home of your own someday." The offer was more generous than Willow had expected. She glanced at her sisters, saw the hope beginning to dawn in their eyes. "We accept," she said, extending her hand formally. Zachary took it, his large, calloused hand engulfing her smaller one. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and Willow felt an unexpected jolt of something that wasn't quite fear, but wasn't comfortable either. The tour of the ranch took most of the morning. The Double M was larger than it had appeared the night before. 5,000 acres of grazing land, with the main house, bunkhouse, barn, stables, and various outbuildings forming the heart of the operation. Zachary had 8 ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse with him, all men who'd been with him for years. "They're good men," he assured the sisters as they watched the cowboys working with the cattle in a distant field. "But they know if they so much as look at any of you wrong, they'll answer to me." "And what about you, Mr. Maverick?" Willow asked pointedly. "Who do you answer to?" His blue eyes met hers directly. "I answer to God, Miss Caldwell, and to my own conscience. Neither has led me astray yet." The days fell into a pattern. The sisters divided the household duties based on their strengths. Willow took charge of the cooking, with Whitney helping when she wasn't tending to the kitchen garden she'd started. Winifred managed the ranch accounts, bringing order to the haphazard system Zachary had been using. Wren, true to her nature, spent as much time outdoors as possible, often helping with the horses. Zachary kept his word and slept in the bunkhouse, only coming to the main house for meals and occasional business discussions with Winifred. He was unfailingly polite, but maintained a certain distance that both relieved and puzzled Willow. A month passed, then 2. The sisters began to settle into their new roles, their fear gradually giving way to a cautious acceptance of their situation. They were fed, clothed, and safe, 3 things that couldn't be taken for granted on the frontier. But as summer heat gave way to the cooler days of early fall, Willow noticed a change in Zachary. He lingered longer at the dinner table, sometimes engaging them in conversation about books or sharing stories about his childhood in Texas. Occasionally, she would catch him watching her when he thought she wouldn't notice, his expression unreadable. It made her uneasy. Not because she feared him, that initial wariness had long since faded, but because she was beginning to look forward to those moments when his serious face would break into a rare smile, usually at something one of her sisters said. It was dangerous to want those smiles, to wonder what it would take to make them appear more often. The tension came to a head one evening in late September. Willow was alone in the kitchen, kneading bread dough for the next day's meals, when Zachary appeared in the doorway. He looked tired, his face grimy from a day spent working with the cattle. "Miss Caldwell," he said, his voice gruffer than usual. "Might I have a word?" Willow's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her expression neutral. "Of course, Mr. Maverick. Would you like some coffee?" "There's still some hot on the stove." He nodded, taking a seat at the kitchen table while she poured him a cup. When she set it before him, he caught her hand, surprising them both. "Willow," he said, using her given name for the first time, "I need to be honest with you." She pulled her hand away, suddenly afraid of what he might say. "What is it?" He took a deep breath. "When I bought you and your sisters at that auction, I told you I needed help running this ranch. That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth." Willow stiffened. Here it was, the other shoe dropping at last. "Go on," she said, her voice cold. "The truth is, I'd seen you before, in town with your parents before." He hesitated before the attack. "I noticed you then. Your strength, your grace, the way you cared for your sisters. When I heard about what happened to your parents, I was devastated for you, and when I saw you on that auction block." His hands tightened around the coffee cup. "I couldn't bear the thought of what would happen to you. So you bought us," Willow finished for him. "Like cattle." "I know how it sounds," he said, his blue eyes pained. "But I didn't know what else to do. Sakura isn't kind to women without protection. I thought. I hoped that in time you might see that my intentions were honorable." "And what exactly are your intentions, Mr. Maverick?" Willow demanded, her heart pounding. He stood up, towering over her, but made no move to touch her. "I had hoped in time that you might consider becoming my wife. Not out of obligation or gratitude, but because you had come to care for me as I already care for you." Willow's breath caught in her throat. Of all the things she had expected him to say, this wasn't it. "Your wife," she repeated incredulously. "You expect me to marry the man who bought me?" Pain flashed across his face. "No, I don't expect it. I hoped for it. There's a difference." He stepped back, giving her space. "I'm not asking for an answer now. I'm just being honest about my feelings. Whatever you decide, nothing changes for you or your sisters. This is your home for as long as you want it to be." Before she could respond, he was gone, the screen door banging shut behind him. Willow stood in the kitchen, flour-covered hands trembling, unsure whether to laugh or cry at the absurdity of the situation. That night, she confided in her sisters, needing their perspectives as she tried to sort through her own tangled emotions. "I knew it," Whitney said, her young face alight with romantic notions. "I've seen the way he looks at you, Willow, like you're the water in the desert." "Don't be dramatic," Willow chided, but there was no heat in her words. "He's a good man," Winifred observed thoughtfully. "Fair in his business dealings, kind to his workers. The ranch is prosperous because he works harder than anyone." "And he keeps his word," Wren added. "He's never once made me feel uncomfortable or afraid, which is more than I can say for most men we've encountered." "But he bought us," Willow protested, clinging to the one fact that still troubled her deeply. "Yes," Winifred conceded, "but what were the alternatives? We were about to be sold regardless. At least he kept us together, as we promised Mama." Willow had no answer for that. The truth was, despite her initial suspicions, Zachary Maverick had proven himself to be a man of integrity. He had given them safety, respect, and the promise of independence if they chose it. And if she was being completely honest with herself, she had begun to feel something for him, a warmth that spread through her chest when he entered a room, a flutter in her stomach when their hands accidentally touched. But was that enough? Could she truly love a man who had purchased her, no matter his intentions? The following days were awkward. Zachary kept his distance, only coming to the house for necessary business. Willow found herself missing his presence, the quiet strength he brought with him. She watched him from the window sometimes, working with his men or riding the boundaries of his property alone. He looked lonely, she thought. A week after his confession, disaster struck. A wildfire, sparked by lightning during a rare dry thunderstorm, raced across the eastern pastures of the Double M. Zachary and his men worked frantically to move the cattle to safety and create fire breaks to protect the ranch buildings. Willow and her sisters joined the effort, carrying water, tending to burns, and providing food and coffee to the exhausted men. As night fell, the fire was finally contained, though several hundred acres of grazing land had been lost. Zachary stumbled back to the ranch house just before dawn, his face black with soot, his clothes singed in places. Willow, who had been anxiously watching for him, met him on the porch with a basin of water and clean towels. "You're hurt," she said, noticing the angry red burn on his forearm. "It's nothing," he said wearily, but allowed her to lead him to a chair and tend to the injury. As she gently cleaned the burn, she studied his face. Behind the mask of exhaustion and grime, she saw the man who had risked his life to save not just his livelihood, but the home he had created for her and her sisters. The home that had become theirs too. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, her voice soft but steady. "About your intentions." He tensed under her hands. "Willow, you don't have to let me finish," she interrupted gently. "I was angry when you bought us. I felt like we had become property, not people, but you never treated us that way. You gave us dignity, respect, and choice when the rest of the world would have denied us all three." She finished wrapping the burn and sat back, meeting his tired blue eyes. "I'm not ready to give you an answer about marriage, not yet, but I am ready to stop punishing you for saving us." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "That's a start," he said softly. "I can wait for the rest." The change in their relationship was subtle but significant. Zachary began taking his meals in the main house again, and sometimes in the evenings, he and Willow would sit on the porch, watching the sunset and talking. She learned about his childhood in Texas, the loss of his father in the war between the states, and how he and his mother had built the Double M from nearly nothing. In turn, she shared stories of her own family, the dreams her parents had of establishing a new life in the West, and the responsibility she felt toward her sisters. As autumn deepened, bringing cooler days and crisp nights, Willow found herself looking forward to these quiet conversations. She began to see Zachary not as the man who had bought her, but as the man who had saved her, and not just from the auction block, but from despair and helplessness. Her sisters noticed the change. Whitney teased her gently about the way she brightened when Zachary entered a room. Winifred nodded approvingly whenever she saw them in conversation. Even Wren, the most skeptical of the sisters, admitted that they seemed well suited to each other. "He needs someone who won't bend to his will too easily," she observed one day as they watched Willow and Zachary engaged in a spirited debate about the best way to expand the kitchen garden. "And you need someone who's strong enough to stand beside you, not above you." The first snowfall of the season came early that year, blanketing the ranch in white just before Thanksgiving. Zachary rode out that morning to check on some cattle in the north pasture, promising to return before dark. But as the afternoon waned and the snow continued to fall, there was no sign of him. By twilight, Willow was pacing anxiously by the window. "Something's wrong," she said to her sisters. "He should have been back hours ago." "The snow's getting worse," Winifred noted worriedly. "If he got caught in it." Willow made up her mind. "I'm going to find him. Wren, you're the best rider. Will you come with me?" Wren was already pulling on her coat. "Of course. We'll take the strongest horses and some blankets." "You can't go out in this," Whitney protested, her young face creased with worry. "We have to," Willow said simply. and in that moment she knew with absolute certainty that she loved Zachary Maverick. The thought of losing him was unbearable. They rode out into the gathering darkness, lanterns held high against the swirling snow. Wren took the lead, her natural affinity for horses serving them well as they followed the North Trail. The ranch hands had wanted to accompany them, but someone needed to stay behind to protect the ranch and the other sisters, so only two of the most experienced men rode with them. The snow was falling so thickly now that they could barely see 10 feet ahead. The cold bit through their clothes, and Willow's face grew numb despite the scarf wrapped around it, but she pressed on, driven by a fear that clawed at her heart. Where was he? Had he fallen, been injured, or worse? They had been searching for over an hour when one of the ranch hands, Miguel, shouted and pointed. Through the curtain of snow, Willow saw a dark shape on the ground. Her heart nearly stopped when she recognized Zachary's horse, standing protectively over a still form half buried in snow. She was off her horse in an instant, fighting through the deep snow to reach him. Zachary lay unconscious, a gash on his temple crusted with frozen blood. His skin was pale with an alarming bluish tint. "He's alive," she cried, feeling the faint but steady pulse in his neck. "But he's so cold. We need to get him warm now." The North Line cabin was closer than the main house. They managed to get Zachary onto Miguel's horse, with the ranch hand holding him in the saddle as they made their way through the storm. The cabin was small and had been uninhabited for months, but it was shelter from the deadly cold. They laid Zachary on the single bed, while Miguel built a fire in the stone fireplace. Wren tended to the horses, bringing them into the cabin's small attached lean-to for shelter. The other ranch hand, Frank, went to fetch more blankets and supplies from their saddlebags. "We need to get him out of these wet clothes," Willow said, her practical nature taking over despite her fear. "And warm him slowly. Too much heat too fast could shock his system." She sent the men outside to gather more firewood, then quickly but efficiently removed Zachary's frozen outer garments. His skin was icy to the touch, his breathing shallow. "Don't you dare die on me," she whispered fiercely as she wrapped him in the blankets they had brought. "Not now. Not when I've just figured out that I love you." Through the night, they worked in shifts to keep the fire burning and to monitor Zachary's condition. Slowly, color returned to his face and his breathing deepened. Near dawn, his eyes fluttered open, focusing with difficulty on Willow's face above him. "Am I dreaming?" he rasped, his voice barely audible. Tears of relief filled Willow's eyes. "No, you're alive, you stubborn man, though you nearly scared the life out of me." A weak smile touched his lips. "Didn't know you cared that much." "Well, I do," she said, smoothing his hair back from his forehead. "More than I realized until I thought I might lose you." His hand, still cold but stronger now, found hers. "Say it again," he whispered. "Please." Willow knew what he meant. Leaning close, she pressed her lips gently to his forehead. "I love you, Zachary Maverick, and if you still want me to be your wife, my answer is yes." The storm passed by midday, leaving the world transformed into a glittering white expanse. They made it back to the main ranch house by late afternoon, where Whitney and Winifred nearly collapsed with relief at seeing them all safe. That evening, gathered around the warm kitchen with her sisters and the man she now knew she would marry, Willow felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced since before her parents' deaths. This was her family now, her sisters and Zachary, the ranch hands who had risked their lives to help find him, even the land itself with its harsh beauty and unexpected gifts. "I think," Zachary said, looking around the table at the four sisters, "that this is what my mother always hoped for. A house full of life and love again." "It's what our parents wanted for us too," Winifred said softly. "Safety, security, a chance at happiness." And we found it, Whitney added, her youthful face radiant, in the most unexpected place. Wren, always the most practical, raised her cup in a toast. To family, she said simply. The one we lost and the one we found. To family, they echoed, and in that moment the bonds that had been forged in tragedy and strengthened through hardship became something new and precious, a future built on choice and love. The wedding took place on Christmas Day, 1878. Sakuro turned out in force for the event, curious to see the culmination of what had become a local sensation, the cowboy who bought 4 sisters at auction and ended up marrying the eldest. Willow wore a dress of ivory satin that she had made herself, with help from her sisters. Zachary, clean-shaven and dressed in a new black suit, looked almost nervous as he waited for her at the front of the small church. "Are you sure about this?" Winifred asked as she adjusted Willow's veil one last time. "It's not too late to change your mind." Willow smiled, serene in her certainty. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life. He's a good man, Winnie, the best man I've ever known." "Well, he'd better be," Wren said, straightening her own dress uncomfortably. She had agreed to wear a dress for the occasion, though she clearly couldn't wait to get back into her riding clothes. Or he'll have 3 very angry sisters to answer to. Whitney, resplendent in blue silk, was practically bouncing with excitement. "It's so romantic," she sighed, "like something from a novel." The ceremony was simple but meaningful. As Willow and Zachary exchanged vows before God and the community, she felt none of the fear or uncertainty that had plagued her in the beginning. Instead, there was only joy and a deep sense of rightness. "I promise to cherish you all the days of my life," Zachary said, his voice strong and sure as he placed the ring on her finger. "To honor your strength, your courage, and your fierce heart, to be not your master but your partner in all things." Willow blinked back tears as she responded with her own vows. "I promise to stand beside you through all the seasons of our life together, to be your comfort in sorrow, your companion in joy, and your equal in all things. Where once I was afraid, now I am certain. Where once I doubted, now I believe." As they were pronounced husband and wife, cheers erupted from the congregation. Zachary kissed her with a tenderness that belied his strength, and Willow knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The reception was held at the Double M Ranch, where tables had been set up in the main room and decorations of pine boughs and red ribbons adorned every surface. The ranch hands had outdone themselves preparing for the celebration, and Mrs. Delgado had supervised the cooking of a feast that would be talked about in Sakuro for years to come. As twilight fell, Zachary led Willow onto the porch for a moment of quiet amidst the festivities. Snow was falling again, soft and gentle this time, adding to the magical quality of the day. "Happy?" he asked, drawing her close against the cold. "More than I ever thought possible," she admitted, resting her head against his chest. "A year ago I thought my life was over when we lost our parents. I never imagined I would find this kind of happiness again." "Your sisters seem to be enjoying themselves," Zachary observed, nodding toward the window where they could see Whitney dancing with one of the younger ranch hands, her face alight with laughter. Winifred was deep in conversation with the local schoolteacher, while Wren was, surprisingly, allowing herself to be led onto the dance floor by Miguel, who had been sweet on her for months. "They're healing," Willow said. "We all are. You gave us that gift, Zachary." "A chance to heal, to grow, to become something new." He shook his head. "No, you did that yourselves. All I did was provide the space for it to happen." He turned her to face him, his blue eyes serious in the fading light. "I want you to know that I meant what I said about the land. It's still yours and your sister's whenever you want it. I never want you to feel trapped." Willow reached up to touch his face, marveling at how this man who had once seemed so formidable now filled her with nothing but warmth and security. "I don't feel trapped. I feel free to love you, free to build a life with you. But thank you for understanding why that choice matters." He kissed her again, and Willow surrendered to the promise of that kiss. To the future it heralded a future built not on possession or ownership, but on mutual respect, shared dreams, and love freely given. The first year of marriage brought changes to the Double M Ranch. Under Willow's influence, the main house was transformed from a functional but somewhat sterile environment into a true home. Curtains appeared at the windows, paintings on the walls, and flowers on the tables whenever the season allowed. Zachary, who had always been respected by his men but somewhat distant, became more approachable. He began hosting Sunday dinners for the ranch hands, creating a sense of extended family that made the Double M not just a place to work, but a community. Winifred, with her sharp mind and education, took over the ranch's accounts completely, implementing new systems that increased profitability. She also began teaching reading and arithmetic to some of the ranch hands who had never had the opportunity to learn. Whitney's garden flourished, expanding beyond kitchen herbs to include vegetables, and even some fruit trees that few thought would survive in the harsh New Mexico climate. She had a way with growing things that seemed almost magical, coaxing life from the arid soil. Wren, true to her nature, became invaluable in working with the horses. She had a natural affinity for the animals that even the most experienced cowboys admired. Under her care, the Double M began breeding and training some of the finest horses in the territory, adding a new source of income to the ranch's operations. As for Zachary and Willow, their love deepened as they settled into the rhythms of married life. They had their disagreements, both were strong-willed and opinionated, but they learned to work through them with honesty and respect. And in the quiet moments when they lay together in the darkness talking about their hopes and dreams, Willow marveled at how far they had come from that terrible day on the auction block. In the spring of 1880, Willow discovered she was expecting their first child. The news was met with joy not just by Zachary, but by her sisters as well, who immediately began planning and preparing for the new arrival. "I hope it's a boy," Zachary said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "With your spirit and determination." Willow laughed. "And if it's a girl, then she'll rule this ranch with an iron fist, just like her mother," he teased, earning a playful swat on the arm. The pregnancy progressed well through the summer months, but as autumn approached, Willow began to experience complications. The local doctor recommended bed rest, a prescription that the active and independent Willow found nearly impossible to follow. "You need to rest," Zachary insisted, his face tight with worry. "For the baby's sake." "I can't just lie here doing nothing while everyone else works," Willow protested. "It's driving me mad." It was Winifred who found a solution, bringing ranch accounts and correspondence to Willow's bedside so she could still feel useful. Whitney filled her room with flowers and herbs known for their soothing properties. Wren read to her from the adventure novels they had both loved as children, transporting her beyond the confines of her bed. And Zachary rarely left her side, rearranging his duties so he could spend most of each day with her. He read to her, played cards with her, and held her when the fear and frustration became too much. "I never thought I'd see the day when Zachary Maverick neglected his cattle for a woman," teased Miguel one evening when he came to report on the day's work. "Not just any woman," Zachary replied, his eyes never leaving Willow's face. "The woman who gave me back my heart." Thomas Zachary Maverick was born on a crisp November morning in 1880 after a long and difficult labor. He had his father's blue eyes and his mother's stubborn chin, and from the moment he drew his first breath, he was the center of his parents' world. "He's perfect," Zachary whispered, cradling his son with hands that seemed too large and rough for such a tiny being. There were tears in his eyes as he looked from the baby to Willow, exhausted but radiant in the aftermath of birth. "Thank you for this gift." Willow reached out to touch his face, her heart so full it felt it might burst. "We made him together," she said softly. "Just as we've made this life together." The sisters took to their new roles as aunts with enthusiasm. Winifred read to Thomas from the moment he could focus on her face, determined that he would have every educational advantage. Whitney sang to him and took him into her garden as soon as he could toddle, teaching him the names of plants and flowers. Wren, to everyone's surprise, had a natural way with the baby, able to soothe his cries when even his parents couldn't. As Thomas grew from infant to toddler, life at the Double M settled into a new rhythm. The ranch prospered under the combined efforts of the Maverick family, becoming one of the most successful operations in the territory. Zachary's fair treatment of his workers and innovative ranching methods earned him respect throughout the region, while Willow's strength and compassion made her a beloved figure in the community. But the sisters' lives were changing too. Winifred, who had been corresponding with the Socorro schoolteacher, Walter Collins, for some time, announced her engagement in the spring of 1882. The scholarly, gentle man was a perfect match for her intellectual nature. "Will you live in town?" Willow asked, helping her sister prepare for the wedding. Winifred shook her head. "Walter's taking a position at the new school being built just 3 miles from here. We'll have the cabin on the north property if you and Zachary are still agreeable." "Of course," Willow assured her. "It's yours, just as Zachary promised. He's already got the men working on expanding it for you." The wedding was a joyous affair, smaller than Willow and Zachary's had been but no less meaningful. As Winifred and Walter exchanged vows, Willow felt a sense of completion. Her sister had found her own path to happiness, one that would keep her close but allow her the independence she deserved. Whitney was the next to find love, though in a more unexpected way. Aaron Daniels, a botanist from back east, arrived in Socorro in the summer of 1883 to study the unique plant life of the territory. When he heard about Whitney's remarkable garden at the Double M, he requested permission to visit. What was meant to be a brief scientific consultation turned into weekly visits, and then daily ones. Aaron was fascinated not just by Whitney's garden but by the young woman herself, her intuitive understanding of plants, her gentle spirit, and her quiet beauty. "He's smitten with you," Willow observed after one such visit, watching her youngest sister's face glow with happiness. Whitney blushed. "He's asked me to accompany him on his next expedition to California. There are plants there that no one has properly classified." Her eyes sparkled with excitement. "Think of it, Willow, the redwood forests, the Pacific Ocean." "And will you go?" Willow asked, though she already knew the answer. "Yes," Whitney said simply. "I love him, and he loves not just me but what I love too. How rare is that?" The wedding took place that fall, a beautiful ceremony held in Whitney's garden among the late blooming flowers. Aaron promised that they would return often to the Double M, and that Whitney would always have a garden of her own wherever they went. As they prepared to depart for California, Willow found herself fighting back tears. "I promised Mama we would stay together," she said to Zachary the night before Whitney was to leave. He held her close, understanding her conflict. "You've kept that promise, Willow. You kept them safe until they were ready to make their own choices. That's what your mother would have wanted." "And what about Wren?" Willow worried. She's the only one left now. Zachary smiled. I think Wren's future might be closer to home than you realize. He was right. Wren, who had always been the most independent of the sisters, had gradually formed a deep bond with Miguel Rodriguez, Zachary's most trusted ranch hand. Their shared love of horses and the outdoors had blossomed into something more, though both were too stubborn to admit it for the longest time. It took a near tragedy to bring their feelings into the open. In the spring of 1884, Miguel was seriously injured when a young stallion he was training reared and struck him in the chest. For days, his life hung in the balance, and Wren never left his side. "Don't you dare die," she told him fiercely when he finally regained consciousness. "Not before I've had the chance to tell you that I love you, you fool." Miguel, weak but alert, managed a smile. "It took me nearly dying for you to admit that." "Well, you never said it either," she retorted, but there were tears of relief in her eyes. "I was afraid," he admitted. "A Mexican ranch hand and the sister-in-law of the ranch owner. I didn't think I had the right." "Love gives you the right," Wren said simply. "And if anyone has a problem with that, they'll answer to me." Their wedding was the simplest of all, a quiet ceremony with only family present, held at sunset on the highest hill of the Double M, with the horses they both loved grazing peacefully in the valley below. They moved into one of the smaller cabins on the ranch property, close enough to be part of the family, but with the independence that Wren had always valued. As Willow watched her last sister embark on her new life, she felt a sense of completion. The promise she had made to her mother had been fulfilled in ways she could never have imagined on that terrible day when they were placed on the auction block. Her sisters were safe, loved, and happy, each in her own way, each with a man who respected and cherished her. And she herself had found a love that continued to deepen with each passing day. Zachary was not just her husband but her partner in every sense, sharing both the burdens and the joys of their life together. Thomas was growing into a strong, kind boy with his father's integrity and his mother's spirit. And now, as the summer of 1884 waned, Willow was carrying their second child, a daughter, she was certain, though she kept that intuition to herself. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching Thomas play with his cousin, Winifred's young son Edward, Willow felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. "What are you thinking?" Zachary asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "I was thinking about the day you bought us," she said honestly. "How terrified we were, how uncertain the future seemed." He took her hand, his expression somber. "Do you ever regret it, the way we began?" Willow considered the question carefully. "I regret the circumstances that made it necessary," she said at last. "But I can't regret where it led us. Look at what we've built together. Zachary, not just a ranch, but a family, a community, a home." He smiled then, the smile that still had the power to warm her from within. "When I saw you on that auction block, I knew I had to act, but I never dared hope it would lead to this much happiness. That day, you saved 4 lives," Willow said softly, "but what you couldn't know was that you were saving your own as well." "And you saved mine in return," he replied, drawing her close. "Every day, you save me from loneliness, from doubt, from the hardness that this life can breed in a man's heart." As the sun set over the Double M Ranch, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Willow Maverick looked out over the land that had become her home. The house that had once seemed so empty was now filled with love and laughter. The sisters who had once faced an uncertain future were now building lives of their own choosing. And the man beside her, the man who had once seemed a stranger and a master, was now the other half of her heart. In the distance, she could see Whitney and Aaron approaching on horseback, returning from their California expedition for an extended visit. Winifred and Walter would join them for dinner, bringing young Edward to play with his cousin. Ren and Miguel would come too, with news of the new horse breeding program they were developing together. "Our family is coming home," Willow said, leaning her head against Zachary's shoulder. "They never really left," he replied, his arm tightening around her. "Home isn't just a place, Willow. It's the bonds we forge, the love we share, the lives we build together." As Thomas ran to greet his aunts and uncles, his childish laughter carrying on the evening breeze, Willow felt the baby within her stir. Another life to love, another thread in the tapestry they were weaving together. From the darkest day of her life had come this abundance of joy, this richness of love, this promise of a future brighter than she could have ever imagined. The auction block that had once symbolized their helplessness had become instead the foundation for a new beginning, not as possessions to be owned, but as women to be cherished, as sisters bound by love, as builders of a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. And in that legacy, Willow knew, the promise she had made to her mother would live on forever.